Natural Bridges State Park in North Adams, Massachusetts. Nothing natural about this place. North Adams, Massachusetts. Checking some of these out. Welcome, zombies. Today we're in Adams, Massachusetts. Also, I guess it's kind of been divided like a North Adams and a South Adams, but they don't call South Adams, but they do call North Adams. We're just going to be looking at Adams, Massachusetts. I'll also check out a state park in North Adams, Massachusetts. And please remember to share these videos with other zombies, because what we're doing here is looking at the leftovers of previous civilizations, our ancestors that used to live in these lands, that were very prosperous and very industrious, and we just haven't really been told about them. Really, the only story we've got is cowboys and Indians. Before that, nobody, and that's just not the case. There's plenty of evidence sitting around that there were advanced civilizations all over the place, and very advanced civilizations all over the place that were amazing builders. And in order to be just absolutely phenomenal builders, you have to have good technology, you have to have good transportation, all of that. They built their buildings like used a lot of gold on their buildings and stuff, and I've talked about this in previous videos where in large part, I think the gold rush we've been told about wasn't, and I grew up in California. I remember taking a field trip as a kid in elementary school, probably, where you go and pan some flakes out of a river or like a little trough thing, and like, yeah, maybe, and sure, you could maybe find a little bit of gold that way. But the gold rush, I believe, in lots of ways was about going to all these old ancient buildings and stripping the gold and the precious gems off of them, off of the statues, off of the different towers, and also the interiors of the buildings as well. And then also, I think we've even, and I'll talk about this in future videos, I don't think I've touched on this much already up to this point, but I believe we've even got mining companies, big mining companies out there, mining mountains and all that, that are, and excavation companies, but probably mainly mining companies that are still doing that. There's been several cases of floods burying even full cities that, like, our cities, frankly, in some cases don't even come close to, have been completely buried. And so I think in some cases, even to this day, there's mining companies out there mining the precious gems, the precious gold, precious metals, all that stuff from previous civilizations that just got buried. You know, that we see like the pyramids and the temple pyramids in Mexico and all that, and it's just so silly because really we've been told that there's no technology, that they were dumb, poor people that built all that. And so it's like, oh well, how'd they do it then? Did the aliens help them? No, there's no aliens that built that stuff. It was just humans, and the mystery is that they had technology, they were prosperous, they knew what they were doing. Simple as that. And the tricky part is just that we've been told a different story, and that's that. Like that's it's really just as simple as that. So let's jump up into my airship and I'll show you Adams, Massachusetts. Right here, Adams, Massachusetts is outlined in this red square. If I zoom out here, I'll show you where we're at. Northeastern corner of the United States. We're right at the border of New York and Vermont and Massachusetts right here. And in my previous video, I touched Williamstown, Massachusetts. I touched on Mount Greylock quite a bit, so I won't necessarily cover that in this video, but so go watch the Williamtowns one to see this leftover tower. Right off the bat, and I noticed this while I was there, really big mills that were just like kind of mind-blowing and pretty much vacant. I mean, they're kind of being used for a couple things, but even the ones that are in use for like studios or little office, like co-working office spaces or whatever, it's just like a little section of the building, and you can see most of the buildings just in ruins, out of use. And it's just, I mean, but they're amazing buildings, and I just go back to the point I've made several times where in lots of cases these buildings are out of use simply because it's very difficult and expensive for us to power them. And that's with our most advanced ever energy systems, right? But cowboys built them and planned on using lumber for them, and again, that's where I just go back to, we've just been fed a stupid story, when the truth is, no, the builders of these weren't the cowboys, were before that, and they absolutely knew energy and sewage and transportation and all of that. The dirt roads, pictures, and story that we see is really just after floods that happened in the late 1800s, set new dirt down everywhere, and then they went out and took pictures and created a new story and all that. But prior to that, we were looking at pretty much castle kingdoms, amazing architecture, energy, transportation. And so right here we see that for much of its history, North Adams was a mill town. And here's one example of them. They call this the NORAD mill. There's also the Eclipse mill that they call it now. And I think there's another one, maybe even one more after that. I don't remember the names of all of them, but I mean, I think one giveaway is these are the people who built these buildings, like that's so much brick that's perfectly stacked right there and very strong and durable. It's been sitting here for a super long time, and we're just throwing tacky plastic signs on top of the buildings and just renaming them over and over and over. But the people who built like this, they would not throw just a tacky sign on it. You know, they did everything out of rock. And it says that manufacturing began in the city before the Revolutionary War, largely because the confluence of the Hoosic River's two branches provided water power for small-scale industry. And I think small-scale was actually, when these buildings were originally built and used, was much more of large-scale industry. And we can see that just by the size of these factories, in my opinion. And then also I wanted to talk a little bit about water power. But I guess real quick before we do that, I don't really have much to say about this. I think it's just interesting, some pretty intense stuff, if the story is true, is going on here. There was Sprague Electric Company, and physicists, chemists, electrical engineers, skilled technicians, US government, World War II, design, manufacture crucial components, advanced weapon systems, including the atomic bomb. And then also it says its products were used for the launch of the Gemini moon missions, etc. So there's just atomic bomb, moon missions, pretty intense stuff, right? Okay, so I wanted to touch a little bit on water power, also known as hydropower. And simply put, it's the use of falling or fast-running water to produce electricity and or to power machines. This ancient architecture, in many cases, it sits right on or is parallel to canalways, rivers, waterfalls, etc. And that, you know, the story that we've been told of the people that built this stuff didn't know how to run water, didn't know how to flush their poop out of the buildings, is just ridiculous, because we can see plenty of evidence that they knew how to do amazing things with waters. I think fountains are just one of the biggest giveaways. And I'll show you some pictures of this in this video where they built waterfalls. They ran rapid water. and it wasn't, and built canals. And we're going to look at a canal and dam made out of marble that they're trying to say is natural, but I'll show you all the reasons, and I think they're pretty good reasons why it's not natural at all. It's man-built out of marble dam, canalway, amazing, to provide waterfalls and rushing water, and for very likely this reason, because if you have the fast falling, fast running water, you can produce electricity and you can power machines. And right there, that's all we'd need to explain, maybe not everything, but that's a ton of what we would need to explain how the heck you actually get these buildings built. And it's just humans. They knew how to build and run water to produce electricity and machines. And now what's interesting is if you read through this page, you know, we're on this whole like green energy thing now and sustainable and renewable energy. It's like, yeah, they were doing that back then. And then if you've watched my previous videos, it's like so many of their dams and canals and water technologies that were around have just been getting destroyed. And now there's the narrative of, oh, we got to go back to clean, we gotta figure out sustainable renewable energy. It's like, yeah, they already had that. That's why we've got empty canals everywhere. That's why we've got a marble dam and canal sitting here. It's like that was already, they had that all figured out already, our ancestors in our past. And I thought this was an interesting picture that they have here on the page. This is Belgium in the 12th century, so this would be in the 1100s. And all right, so first of all, we see exactly this, and I'll show you more of this in future videos, but this exact architecture, exactly like this, rock and stone, brick, even mixed like this, and then canalways running right through the buildings. And we'll also see depicted in lots of cases wheels or cogs, gear looking wheels type of things that look very similar to what's depicted right here, and just simply water technology. So you got a canal with falling, rushing water, and then you've got a wheel right here, and you can produce electricity and power machines. And they're saying that this right here dates to the 12th century in Belgium, and you know, we see this exact same stuff here in this country, the United States of America, but that will only date to the 1700s, 1800s, but nothing prior to that, right? Because prior to that it was just Indians and teepees, but that's just not the case. This was everywhere already many years before the 1700s and the 1800s. It also does talk about dam bursts. Like right here it says, dam failures can have catastrophic effects, including loss of life, property, and pollution of land. And that's something I've pointed out in these videos, especially when we're talking about entire cities getting buried, that sort of thing. And there's several ways that I point out that that can happen, but a really easy, simple one, and there's been evidence of it, is just dams and reservoirs. Whether there's an accident or whether it's just opened or redirected, that sort of thing can send tremendous amounts of water into a city and completely bury it, destroy a lot of it, etc. Here's another mill, and they say this one was demolished. So it's just not even there anymore, but again, just amazing, just huge buildings, honestly. Like, these are very big buildings. The stories of these buildings and the windows on these buildings are much taller than we do nowadays. And I've actually stayed in one of the old factories, old mills in St. Louis, Missouri, and it was really before I was starting to like understand what this architecture is and everything. And it just felt different. I was like, wow, it feels better inside. I can tell this is built way better. The light in here is a lot nicer because these windows are so much taller. And I mean, the only reason we get tripped up, the lies that we've been taught trip us up, definitely, but also, like, we just think of this stuff as old, and it looks kind of old because it is, but that's also proof of how well it's built because it's still standing around and is still extremely strong and durable and intact. But we're just so focused on like new, nice, shiny that to most of us, and I was this way just uneducated, frankly, for a long time. But you see a new nice home built out of stick framing, maybe a concrete foundation, and just because it's new, we're like, oh, that's the better one. But like, no, those big, new, beautiful, seemingly beautiful wood framed homes like that just get crushed. Like a flood, gone. A fire, gone. Floods and fires don't really mess with these buildings. Like, you can set one of these on fire, the rock's still gonna be standing. You can send a flood, it'll bury a lot of the building if new earth settles from the flood, but it will still stand there and it'll still be poking up. And I also mentioned we're going to check out a state park, which the more I've looked into this and explored places, parks, state parks, national parks are just covering up stuff that's previous ancestral advanced buildings. In this case, it's a marble dam and a marble canal that our ancestors built, and they call it Natural Bridge State Park. And I'm just going to say this about the word natural. I think a lot of us have learned in food, on like food packaging and everything, you can use the word natural and it means nothing at all. In fact, it could mean the opposite. You can get away with putting the word natural on it and nothing about the food in the package is actually natural. And I'm just calling the same thing here. Like, they're saying this is a natural bridge. This is completely man-built, all of it, and I'll give you some more reasons why as we go. I think I'd like to point this out as well. It says the bedrock marble from which the natural bridge was created is estimated to be some 550 million years old. And I just really believe that there is not millions and billions of years to necessarily go back to. I think narratives and lies have been created saying millions and millions of years and billions of light years and glaciers billions and billions of years ago, carving stuff out, and it's just it's such a big timeline and so far out that we frankly just don't comprehend it. And I think really what it's doing is alienating us from actually how close these things are to us. Like our ancestors that did build these things not that long ago, but if you slap a date of 550 million years ago on it and we buy it, we believe it, then yeah, like that really like screws up the truth and how we look at things on our earth and in our cities. And I think, the same thing with space and how fast we're spinning and moving through how big and vast and like how many light years and blah, blah. It's just like, I think it's all just like takes away like the normal person's ability to like look at things and comprehend and understand, and you have to like turn it over to these experts and scientists and that have all the technology and tools and however much schooling. And it's just like I think really what most of that is for is just to really make it so that we don't understand how actually close these technologies, these people are to us, like not that far back. I think at most we're dealing with thousands of years. Honestly, I don't think millions, and I definitely don't think billions of years is actually true. This is 1905 in Adams, Massachusetts, and again, almost never do you see any horse and buggy on a dirt road hauling stone, and never the amount of stone that we see that had to be used to construct all of these buildings. And here's just another example of, I don't know what this is, hay, straw, but just like a couple horses and dirt cart can move all that. And it's like, that weighs nothing compared to just one of these stones that are placed in one of these buildings. And literally it takes millions of stones to build these buildings. This is an academy building in 1905. Not very clear, but if it were clear, I think we could, see the dirt right here and everything, and it would, in so many of these cases, just look like a building that's still poking up after a huge flood that left a bunch of new dirt. Okay, so this one is a then and now. So this is what the entrance to this place looks like now, and this is what it used to look like. All right, look at this amazing, perfectly constructed arch with all this design carved out of the rock, and then just turned into this. And I can't wait to get to there'll be some other ones too, but specifically a video that I'll make here in California, because I just went to a library here recently and was poking through some books, and I found a good then and now book, and it's like there was amazing architecture like this, just old world castle kingdom type of architecture, and it's just tore it down and turned it into something. It's turned it into a park, or it looks like this now, where it doesn't look nearly as amazing as it used to, and it's just over and over and over and over again. This is the Armory in Adams, Massachusetts, and that's just a piece of a castle right there, right? Then you've got this tower over here to the left. This is the interior of one of the banks, and this is one, I will a little bit more in future videos, but not as much as I'd like to, but enough, definitely sufficient. But I'd like to be able to see interiors of much more of these buildings, because the outside is insane, but then when you look at the interior, it's equally, maybe even more insane, because look at this marble pillars, marble counters. Look how high the ceilings are, just how spacious it is. So the floor here doesn't look too intricate or whatever, but I'll show you somewhere. The flooring in some of these buildings is just as insane too, and all out of rock. It's again, so that makes zero sense for this wood story narrative. And I just all the weight of all these pillars, all the marble. Look how high the ceilings are, etc. If you're that capable and that expert, you'd pave a road. You would. This is the Baptist Church in Adams, Massachusetts. Very cool. I think we'll get a shot of this. I'll try and, if I do have a shot of it, I'll try and compare it to this image, see if anything's different. But looks like we've got some really cool stone at the bottom, and then brick on the top of it here. Few towers on it, and just looking like it's buried. I think this is how we see this window up here, where this guy's standing as a new entryway. I think that's literally just another one of these windows, and there could be several more stories of this tower exactly like that. Here's another Baptist church in North Adams, Massachusetts. Some super tall steeples on it, and then I also did notice it has this extremely tall pole right here that's going up way higher than any of the steeples even. Not sure what that is. I imagine they would say it's a flagpole or something like that, but I don't know about that. And then dirt roads, of course. They knew exactly what they were doing with water. They knew how to produce clean water for drinking and all that, but also they knew how to run the water to produce electricity and power their machinery, etc. And there's a bunch of this all over the country, and a lot of it's dried up now, a lot of it's been decommissioned, but when you look back at these old photos, you can see wow, that was a beautiful, what we call river, but they built it. They carved it out, they laid the rock, they made the waterfalls, they made it so it ran fast, and they placed mills, what we call mills, and factories right on the rivers. Here's a look at the Berkshire Mill, and you can see here just like how very big this actually is. And all these mills, all these old factories that I pull up in these videos and that I've seen are just, they're tremendous. They're very, very big. And again, we're just looking at the tops of them poking up. And these towers on them are really insane too, because they're all made out of brick and they're extremely tall, perfectly circular, just very amazing as far as architecture goes. And here's another part of just water technology, what they did with water. So this is a bridge, but this is this is how the ancients built to run their, and you can see the waterfall behind it right there. It looks like this one's a bit decommissioned, out of use, but aqueducts. And then here's a look at the Eclipse mill, I believe. Here's another look at it from a more of an aerial view. And again, just a beast of a building. And it really looks like it's like been sunken down, or new earth has risen up to it. It looks buried. You can see this amazing tower on it right there. Here's another one, and it's got that pole sticking up off the top of it, which I don't know, the more I keep seeing those, and I think they try and say they're flag poles or lightning rods, but oftentimes at the tippity top of these towers we do see a little metal piece sticking up out of them. And so I wonder if, and then we also see many of these towers have the tops of them off and they've just been squared off at the top, which, this one still seems to be a little bit intact. But what if they just took the top piece off of this one, and there was originally a rod used to harness power, electricity, etc., and it's just exposed now. Here's another look at the Eclipse mill, and I'll show you, it might be this one exactly, but I actually got in and walked inside of this tower, and it's pretty amazing. This one blew my mind. I'll show you some of this, but a high school. And in so many cases, this old architecture, these old leftovers, they turn them into government buildings, hospitals, high schools, I don't know what else. They post offices, stuff like that. And then I thought this is, this photo is really, really crispy, which was cool. I just think it's like, look at all this. This is old world, ancient architecture, like the same stuff that they date way, way, way back in Italy, in Belgium, France, that sort of thing. But it's like, oh nope, here the cowboys built it. And then I think this is where they've got these cables running everywhere, and the builders of these rock buildings just were not sloppy like that. Like, this is very sloppy electricity, and I believe their towers and everything were how they harnessed electricity and energy. But I think this picture just really is just another one where it's like, I think we showed up to this stuff sitting here that matches all the old world architecture, and then we started putting it to use. We threw signs on it, we threw some cloth on it, we had to figure out what to do with the dirt roads, and eventually started running our messy electric cables everywhere so the electric companies could measure electricity and make people pay for every little bit of it instead of harnessing it and giving it freely. This is a post office in North Adams, Massachusetts. Amazing old world building. This one's another school. They called this the normal school. And you can see this level down here is just completely buried. And I imagine these arched, what are now entrances, were again just windows, exactly like we see up here, right? But down here, we busted them out, put a couple steps in front so we can get in and out of the building now. This is the State Normal School dormitory and president's residence. Here's the St. Mark's Episcopal Church. Really amazing. And a train station right here in North Adams. Trains and like bridges like this, I think in lots of cases already there. I talked about that previously. I think I touched on that a lot more. I did touch on that a lot more in the Williamstown video. Here's the Wilson Hotel in Adams. Wow, right? Like, look at this thing. Look at like that. I highly doubt that's just decoration up there. But look at this building. Like, that is amazing. This is exactly old world architecture. Much older than the dates were given on it. And of course, we've got our horse-drawn carriages and wood carts here and all that. This is the tower that I touched on in the previous video in Williamstown. And I just thought this was the most amazing building. And a lot of it's still very intact. And I was like, I don't know, I would love to, I think it would be so cool to buy one of these, to own, you know, but they're very expensive to power. So, but maybe it would be interesting to see if could figure out how to get some of the old technology to work, how to, you know, harness energy with the tower and all that. But I just thought this building was so cool. I mean, you can see the arches down here on the pillars. It's all the stone, and this huge window. It still had the a Celtic cross on it back there. And when I get around to editing this video, I might give him a call and just see if I can get some more information on the building. But I mean, on this one, I really feel like you can see this thing is aged, and not a couple hundred years, because on this type of durable stone, like, a couple hundred years isn't going to do too much to it. This looks like a lot more years than that. And of course, there's got to be a wood cabin somewhere, right? Because it's just all old world rock architecture. But so let's plop down a cabin, so at least there's some sort of story there, of real story in the town of cabins. Built in 1782 by Quakers who had settled Adams, then called East Hoosac. And this building, unchanged since 1782, displays a variety of handiworks. So I don't know, I think they might have wrapped an old building in wood right here, an old rock building in wood, to make it look like a cabin, because there's a big brick chimney sticking out of it. But also, I feel like this could just be completely made up for the story. I'm not really sure. But if this is still sitting here intact like this since 1782, where's all the rest of the cabins they built? They must have just quickly got replaced by all this old world architecture. The old world rock buildings, everything we're seeing was already here. This is the false city. Here's one of the churches from behind, and just look how big of a building this is. How much there is, like how many different pieces there are to it. It would be a very complicated building to build way back then. So complicated. And then down here at the bottom we can see stone, and the windows sitting right there in the stone. And so I imagine we're just seeing another one of those buildings where it's like altered. You know, you've got stone and then brick and then stone and then brick. And look at this guy right here, just buried. Here's a look at it from the front now. Just really, really amazing brickwork, creating different design out of how they're placing the brick. Arch right here, made out of brick. And then you've got, you know, these bigger stones over these arches. And this tower is pretty amazing. Big old steeple on it. And then you can also see over there to the right, there's another amazing church brick building, which I believe we'll go look at in a second. But I wanted to pan over to the left here, and this is one of my, there's a lot of favorites honestly at this point, but that yellow one right there is super cool. Another big brick building. This whole little like just corner right here is that's just amazing. In lots of cases, these buildings have been very stripped and we're left with literally just the brick exposed. But in this case, it's still got a lot of the original design on it, which is so cool. And like when I say stuff was gold, I think these windows very easily could have been trimmed in gold. These pillars could have been gold, stuff like that. And then I imagine there was more stuff shooting off of the top here. I think it has been stripped on the top. But you see some more just really amazing design right here that, again, just all would have had to have been done by hand. But I just don't think that's true. I think these are much older, and I think they used their water systems to, and other ways too. I think their water systems and towers, like they had several ways to produce energy. And then here's that other church I pointed out that was just sitting to the right of the first church we were looking at. Again, amazing arches right here that we've turned it. There's the exact same type of windows as up here. Looks like the arches above them are a little bit different, but these weren't originally doors, just windows again, because we're looking at the tops of these buildings, most of them being buried. And then this church right here was also another one of these buildings for sale. Again, most likely because they're just very expensive buildings to power. And this is a look at that first church from the side. And just look, that little doorway right there. Look how tiny that doorway and cheap that doorway looks compared to the rest of this building. And that right there is what I mean by metal pieces sticking out. You know, sometimes it's a cross, sometimes it's several things, but it really looks like there's a metal rod running through this entire steeple. So if you just took apart the steeple, you could very easily see just a metal rod poking up. Here's a look at one of the mills. I'm not quite sure which one this is, but tons of windows in it. I almost wonder if maybe this was all an open air facility, some sort of wind technology, and then we've put a bunch of windows in there. Just guessing there on that one, but could be. But the amount of brick is just tremendous. Here's a look at the train station. It's got these huge towers close by, all made out of brick. And then there, look, we throw our technology up there at the top, connected to this mill factory type of thing. And then here's a look at a waterway that runs right next to it with old walls. I think this is just an old canalway sitting at the top of this previous castle kingdom. And such a shame. In some cases there's no water in these. This one has a little bit, but across the whole country these are everywhere, and most of the time empty. And down the way here, so you can see just other sections of this factory still poking up, but like I said, just like I mentioned, completely abandoned, just sitting in ruins, even though they're some of the most amazing buildings. And this one was just absolutely stunning. There was I'm sure some stuff has been stripped off of this building, but we see a lot more still on it than we see on a lot of these buildings. And just the brickwork, everything about this building was honestly so mind-blowing. This tower right here, I'll show you some more shots, but I mean, they look small because they're so high up there and the building's so big, but those are full-blown, I can't quite tell, but probably marble pillars up there. And the brickwork, look at all that design and the brickwork. And so if I show you the top of this tower right here, see, that's what I mean. There's a metal rod sticking out the top of it. And look right here, just how all this brick is layered like that. And look how huge these windows are. Multiple stories tall, stained glass windows. This building's just really, really insane. And what's funny is most of the time we just drive by this stuff like it's nothing. But I mean, I think we should really stop and appreciate the architecture here, because it's not stuff that we're doing. This is how the old world built, and it's frankly better than what we build. Our wood cabins, our stick frame houses. And although I don't think this door is necessarily original, because I think this was maybe a window, pretty cool door, but the pillars I thought was super cool. The marble pillars, again, that flower design carved on the top of it. And these huge, super thick brick arches, layered brick arches. I mean, if the cowboys built this stuff, let's bring the cowboys back. And then here's a look at it from the side, where it gives you a much more, it's a much bigger building than you might have even thought. And then back here, it's got that octagonal type of section to it. The stone down here, and you can see right there, maybe kind of hard to see, but that's a full buried window right there that they've just covered up with a little sheet of metal. And then here's another church that I found. This one has white siding thrown all over it instead of just leaving the rock exposed. A couple towers on it with the metal rods coming out of the towers. And speaking of wheels and using wheels to produce electricity and all that, you see a bell and a wheel in here. The story we're told is that a bell was just to tell the time of day or something, but yeah, when you actually look into these bells and how much it takes to build them and the process and how heavy they are, and they're lifted into these super tall towers that oftentimes have open windows to let air through. Technology. And then here's another look at this church with the wheel and the tower. Get a little better shot of the wheel right here. Yeah, you can tell there's a wheel up there. And right across the street from it is this guy that clearly has been stripped. I mean, there were towers on it. There was design, more, I don't know, whatever right there on the front of the tower. Here's a look at the Armory, which is such a cool looking building. And looking super, super, super old. I wish I knew more about what that might say or mean right there, but a couple towers on it, whatever was on top of the tower has been stripped. This one was a very cool find. And I did notice that several of these have that fallout shelter symbol on it for I mean, I guess we read in the wiki page that they talked about making atomic bombs here, so maybe some connection there. And then I believe in part this would just be a repurposing. This building already here, we throw a tacky sign on it, and because they're so well built and so strong and durable out of pure super thick rock, yeah, it would probably work pretty well for getting out of the way of some fallout. But then there's this on the side of it, which is really interesting. Yeah, I just don't really know here, but I'll take a guess, because this yellow brick looks much newer than any of this other rock that we're seeing. I mean, this rock just really looks like it's been through a lot. Like, it's been there a long time, it sat through some fire, stuff like that. And so, I don't know, I could be just completely wrong here. But it almost looks like maybe this front piece was still standing here, and then this was added on later, but then maybe these were also just already standing here, and then they just filled these sections in with brick to create a wall and like a second half of this building. I have no clue. Or maybe it was, or maybe there was stone on top of this brick, because we've seen that before, where a brick building will then be facaded with granite or marble or whatever different type of stone. So maybe that got stripped off, because that's another thing you learn when you're doing research in these buildings is, like, when they raise them, just another word for destroying them, demolishing them, they'll oftentimes take the stone and repurpose it or sell it into other buildings, that sort of a thing. And this building sits just right across the street from that yellow one with a lot of art still on it that I pointed out towards the beginning. And then even more towards the back of that building, we find this, where there's some red brick which has been covered in cement, which has been torn off, and then it looks like that cement was even used to cover up some of this stone. So I don't know, I just don't really know here. Looks like the building's maybe been patched up a bunch. Looks like it's buried. Looks like this is actually marble. So that's cool, I didn't notice that. But brick, and then over the windows and arches we've got marble. Like, these are gorgeous right here. Circular windows. Some torches right there with ribbons. I mean, I wonder what that means. There's stuff, all this is symbolic of something. I wish I knew more about it. And then I honestly wanted to come back and look at this church some more. I really liked this one. Very cool stonework. I like the different coloring in it, and it had a lot of the ornamentation still on it. See, like, that just to me is a piece of technology right there. They designed it in their kind of way, but I think that's a piece of technology right there on the top of the tower. You can see the wood ramp down there that we created. I mean, that's us. We build out of wood. Ancient people built out of rock like this. And I had to get in here and have a little look, and just look at the floor already. Like, this is, I guess, open outdoor area with the marble columns, the tiled floor. Look at all this stonework. And it's like, hey, I even wonder if that stone has just been stripped of gold or something that was originally there. And then here's a look walking into it from this side of the tower. It's a little tunnel. Perfect stone arches. So it looks like we got brick right here on this part of it. See, that's what I mean. Like, I wonder if the core of it is brick, and then it's got different stone on top of all the brick. And then here's a couple more that I found just in disrepair, but same type of ancient architecture. Tons of brick, big towers, shell roof, mixed with stone. Huge stained glass windows. So this one's a junior high over here. I mean, look at that. All this for a junior high. Little face up there. Look at that. And that's such a realistic face too. And then this is just one piece of it. If we look at all the rest of this building to the side, just massive for a junior high school. Really what it is just a leftover building that's been repurposed into a junior high. Got the torches and the shield, book of scripture, some arched windows right into the ground. And then these ones over here have actually just been completely covered up. You can see those 3 slits, let's call them 3 slits, like we're seeing right up here. Like that length of a slit straight down in the ground. These are very tall buildings. I believe in many cases these are like what we think of skyscraper height, and that much of them is actually buried. I mean, look at that. Those are clearly just 3 of those slits running down more. Maybe not, you know, hard to know for sure, but sure looks like it. Here's another one that I found. The tower is just completely gone off the top. It's been squared off, but you can see super old brickwork, arches, stained glass windows. Same thing with this one here. And then here's those 2 towers that I pointed out, which sit in just the middle of a parking lot of a grocery store. Which is what I'm saying, like that doesn't make sense. So what I think does make sense is huge factory, new floods came in, left new earth. We just paved on top of the new earth, and these towers, you know, just that's where they were. But if you look how perfectly constructed they are, again, so much brick. Not going to use any of that brick to ever pave a road. We're just going to do it all on dirt roads. Just sitting randomly in the middle of a parking lot. And then I don't think I pointed this out earlier on this church that had the couple gold crosses. So it's got another gold cross back here. But then I thought this piece of, so it's kind of like that octagonal design that we see on a lot of these. But then it had like sharp, very sharp angles to it. I thought that was really cool. And just like this is the one that's for sale. Just look how big this building is. Given our utilities, yeah, very expensive to power that. Oh, interesting. I forgot these were even here. But yeah, like I mentioned, I think even to date, there's still some mining companies going at it. Here we've got one out here. Mining away at some of the old rock that remains on kind of the exterior of these buildings that we've looked at, that we've been looking at, which I've mentioned before, and I've shown you some decent proof in previous videos that in some cases these could be just walls that guarded the kingdom, or just more structures out there that have been through a lot more disaster than these ones that are still around in better shape. But not necessarily just mountains that we think of them, but in lots of cases, like, I mean, the old civilizations built huge buildings out of rock. And so if, you know, scriptures talk about fire and brimstone, and I don't know exactly what that is, but, you know, if, for lack of a better, I apologize, this is kind of maybe a crude way of saying it, but if those buildings just got zapped and melted, and they could turn into crumbly, solidified mountain structures like we think of, that mining companies would love to go to and gather the rock, sure, but then also whatever might be inside of those rock structures that we just call mountains. I also found this sculpture, which to me looks very ancient. I think they've turned it into a war memorial type of thing, but like, I think we've got what we do. That's ancient symbolism and design right there on this type of tower thing with the eagle on top of it. And I think we've just scratched victory into it. And I think these green pieces running along it might be new additions to it. Maybe not, I'm not quite sure, but this one right here looks like a snitch from Harry Potter. See, and that one's not even green, that's just like a bronze one. So yeah, I think that's kind of been added on. But then right here, maybe not, I don't know, we see. Hard to say. I kind of feel like the green pieces might be added on, but I don't know. And so I thought this house was really interesting because you see an old brick wall in front, you see the stone on the ground, you see the buried windows, you see this crazy design, what we call chimney, poking up, but then just white siding on the rest of it, making it look like, just making it look a little dumpier. But I mean, this whole thing, I believe, is just another one of these huge stone structures. And then here's a picture backed out a ways where you can see, just look at what's poking up right here. Big steeple, 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 piece of a castle right there. Then you've got this section over here, we've got those brick buildings with the facades on front. Very cool looking. Just right across the way from all those steeples I just pointed out. And the bridge that I'm on looking out over everything, I believe is also a leftover bridge, because you've got this design rock right here, which is part of the bridge, and then they throw a plaque into it, say it was constructed in 1940, reconstructed in 2012. But I think this is just a leftover. And I think this is how that ends up being, if I could show you this real fast. So I think, like I said, I think these were not only just skyscraper height buildings, but much taller skyscrapers than we even think of as skyscrapers. To the point where I think this is a very realistic what America used to look like right here. And you know, I'm threw all these blue lines over it to show like water burying everything and new earth settling. And then we're left with the tippity tops of everything poking up. And then in lots of cases have gone around and stripped off the big domes on top. So we're left with just much squarer type of buildings. And if you pay attention right here. So you've got, if we look down here, you know, you've got rail systems all the way, let me zoom. You've got rail systems and bridges all the way down in here. Like there's a bridge that would be buried. This is all a really long train bridge that's been buried. But then if we look up here, we've got a bridge back here, right? And then we've got these couple bridges over here. And I think so in some cases, we've got huge floods that have buried tons of this. But even though that's the case, we've still got bridges exposed that were connecting different pieces of these cities and skyscrapers in different ways. And then we've just repurpose them, we reuse them. And I think that's what we're seeing here with this bridge and in other bridges that I point out in these videos. And oftentimes they go around and throw a new plaque on them. Like I literally just went to one here in Newport Beach. It's the same thing. It's like 1920s. There was a population of 2,000 cowboys and dirt roads just barely starting to settle the West. But for some reason, they're constructing just amazing bridges. It's just a new story on a very old bridge that sat really, really high up in these super tall ancient cities that have been buried. And so here we are on that bridge that sits at the height at the top of these steeples and buildings. And then our plastic Dollar Tree sign and siding thrown on top of brick buildings down here. Look, this is old world up here. Old brick, huge steeples, and then I believe this is probably an old building, but we've thrown our plastic or wood siding on top of it. And then they also had this on another section of the bridge, which is those same kind of what we just saw on that tower, war memorial kind of thing. Where again, I don't know if that's new that they slapped on there or if that was originally there. I can't really tell on that, but it's got the old language on it. There was also this huge elephant kind of a thing. I'm not saying this is a leftover, I don't think it is, but it was interesting to see. Maybe it's a nod to the big animals that were used to help build this city back in the day. Another big brick one with a tower that's been, whatever was on top of it got stripped off. And it had some old symbology on it, which I thought was pretty cool. And I found this type of symbology in little tiles that I can remember in, I believe, Lincoln, Nebraska, either Lincoln or Omaha, but on a church there that had just a completely old world, huge tower on it with old world people, knight type looking people depicted on there. And I was actually sharing that image, that building, some pictures and videos of it with someone the other day, and they were like, man, it looks like the old world, like they looks like the knights, like medieval knights, and I'm like, yeah, that's correct. I mean, if you read the old texts, if you read, like, even in the Bible we'll talk about it, but especially in the Book of Mormon, when it talks about all the civilizations that built these things, like they had to build massive castle kingdoms, fortresses, and defend themselves to keep their independence. And they're all the time described as having all sorts of industry, all sorts of weapons of war, having all sorts of shields and helmets. And it's like, so if we're gonna see any leftovers from them in these lands, yeah, that's what they would look like, is warrior type of people. But the reason we get confused about it is because the story we've been taught in all our schools and our cartoons and all that is poor rag people. There's a little bit of like, even when they do show us like knights and kingdoms and castles, then it's like, oh, well, they were still poor. They built all that stuff, but they were still poor and they were in rags and they lived in their own poop and all that kind of stuff. It's just like, nah, but when you actually piece it all together, connect all the dots, those are lies. And yes, they were warrior type of people, but in many cases they were very prosperous warrior type of people. And the reason that they were warrior type of people and built castle kingdoms with huge walls was to keep out enemies, because enemies wanted to capture their cities and all their gold and their silver and their technologies and all that. It's not like they just wanted to capture their rags, They had built big, prosperous fortress cities, and enemies wanted to conquer that and get it all. And so they had to be prepared with towers and technologies and all sorts of everything to be able to, and so that's why we see that depicted on all this stuff, is because those are the people that built this stuff, and that's how they lived back then. Like, we're super soft compared to how they lived. Like, they knew very much what it took to grab freedom and maintain it, and it was difficult because there's always an enemy that wants to come and conquer. And so and they knew, like, it's not just hand that over to a government and let them take care of you. Like, not you as the people had to be the ones to build the kingdom and protect it. And this little intersection was super interesting. It had like this rounded building, kind of reminds me of like the Flatiron building in New York City. And I just talked about how tall some of these were, and maybe that's exactly what we're seeing here, is just a Flatiron type of building, but here in North Adams, Massachusetts. Here's a look at it from the side, looking on down the road. And yeah, I think we're just, there's castle walls right here. And here's the high school. I showed in the oldies but goodies, I showed an old photo of this. You can see this old kind of symmetrical, I don't know what to call it. I don't know if they're bridges or it's a wall, but it's got all that design in it. And then with this huge building sitting behind it, completely ancient. Tons of brick, pillars, the flower design on the pillars. And this whole section was really interesting, where like this wall right here, and then it's got this little, I don't know, granite brick circle thing happening right here. I just think whatever was originally here has been buried or destroyed. It looks pretty buried, honestly. And at the top of it here, you see the Hoosac Tunnel and Railroad there, and like, I wonder if that's original right there, from the original builders of this, and then we maybe added this piece to it, the gray that's encircling it. But it's cool to see the color on here, because in most cases that's been stripped and gone. You know, again, we see like a knight up there in that shield. And look at the detail on this entryway right here. Very cool, very old world, weathered. And this is the high school. Got a shield right there that's empty. I think that 1916 might be new, added on at a much later date. But again, like, I imagine this piece we're looking at is just a piece of just the tippity top of a much, much taller tower type of thing. And these doors, not doors, windows, just like we're seeing up here. Like, literally this top piece right here, like, cut that out and turn that into a door, and that's what we're looking at right here. And put some steps in front of it. And then if we pan down to the side here, you'll see that, you know, these look disconnected, but I imagine this is all just one structure, and then new earth settled much, you know, this high up on it, and we paved, and now it looks like two separate buildings. And again, with a kind of octagonal piece on the back of it, and then stone at the bottom. And see, like right here, it kind of makes me think maybe that's just repair work, and maybe that, because that stone looks a bit sloppier than the very neatly stacked brick. So maybe that's just a repair job. And then here's a look at this kind of castle building. So I don't remember exactly. I think kind of like I was showing you in Adams, Massachusetts, and now we might be in North Adams or South Adams, or I don't know which one's which, but there's kind of two different sections here, and we're kind of in the second section now, where I showed you all the steeples. That's the section we're looking at now. And so yeah, look at this. I mean, that's again another one that just looks so old and so beat up. But like, is it really beat up? Not really. It just kind of looks like it, because the rock's super old and weathered. But this thing's still standing here super strong and sturdy. And whatever was on the top of the tower here has been stripped off. And you can see just stories of windows going into the ground, big buried. And these right here, like I imagine, again, I just don't, maybe it's just design, but I imagine there's some sort of technological energy component to those. And here's a look at one of those churches with a couple of those big steeples on it. Same stuff I've been saying. Sorry if it's so repetitive, but these are windows that have been turned into doors. You can see the stonework down here. Tons of brick, and I mean, look, you could clearly see this thing sat at one point perfectly level with the flat earth, and now there's a new slope to it from just new mud, new earth being laid down that we've paved on top of, with a rod coming out the top with some design on it, and the stonework down here on the bottom, which I think gives us a very clear idea of like, yeah, they alternated. Oh, I guess so. This isn't a factory. Oh, this is that wall. Yeah, that wall of buildings I was showing you when I was giving you the shot of the steeples. But yeah, look how interesting that is right there. You know, we've got all this brickwork on, and then just the facade on front, a marble facade. Really interesting. And you can see right there depicted in the top of that little window is they've got another rose window or wheel type of thing. All the layered brick right there. Very cool. And then here's a post office. Amazing brickwork. Yeah, it looks like there's some marble there. Looks like these are made out of marble. And then you've got these stepped rectangle square things running up it. These marble designs over the windows. Marble at the top of the building there. Pretty cool post office in my opinion. With a lot of old world art on it. And this guy I thought was amazing right here across the street. Very unique. I've seen this type of design a few times now, but not a whole lot. This is definitely more rare than like all those red brick buildings that we just saw. But like these pillars that it has on it. Here's a look at the post office from the other side. From what I guess would be the front. Again, windows turned into doors in my opinion. Whatever was right here in these circles is stripped and gone. You can see this little castle structure, stone off to the left. And here's a better shot of it. So you thought it was just this little piece over here, but no, it's actually this whole big guy. Beautiful. Amazing architecture. Look at this. Straight castle stone. Just tucked away back here at the end of a street. Again, windows turned into doors. Look at the length of it too. It's a big, big building. Shale roof. Beautiful colors on it. And then here's a look at it from the side. And same story. Looking quite a bit buried. Okay, back to this one. Like, look at these pillars. Those are so cool. Those are pretty long bricks too, it looks like. And then look at this, and look at this arch right here. Like, that is just, whew, look at that. That's an amazing arch. And more pillars, more brick pillars. And then you got brick pillars up here in the top of the tower, or at least, you know, I don't think that's actually the top. I think it's been stripped off, whatever was actually up there, but still a couple pillars up there in the tower. So here's a look at it from the side. Like, I just think this thing's so cool. And you got this mansion looking house, which is so cool. I mean, and look at this type of dome on top of it. And then here's a look at those shops up close. And you can see that that one in the middle has some more of those brick pillars. And look at the arches, and then that, all that art above the arches. And then that transitions into this marble over here on this side. And actually, if you look close on at the top of those pillars, it looks like there's actually faces. And then here's driving through one of this is the Eclipse mill. That's what they call it now. I forget what the real name of it is, but you can see the same thing. Just like you can see the building gradually being buried and windows just disappearing. And this is right on the way right here. I'll take a left to go into the Natural Bridge State Park, where there's the marble dam. Zombies, I went ahead and turned the marble dam, also known as Natural Bridge State Park, into its own episode. So that's going to be episode 22. Go give that one a watch.